Welcome, everybody. We're going to give everyone here a minute or two to join. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Thank you, everyone, for joining our fourth webinar. Today, we are going to be covering everything you need to know about content marketing in the finance space, from strategy to execution. You have myself, Alison Pfaff. I'm the president of StoryStudio, and with me, we have our creative director extraordinaire, Chloe Dinsdale, who's going to be walking you through some live examples. And at the end, we should have some time for a Q&A. So kicking it off, finance is a complicated category. There is a lot that goes into it, many different facets of information to cover. So we have worked with large national banks, we have worked with local banks, credit unions, credit card companies, investment service companies, and even fintech, which is one of the categories actually within finance that's growing quite rapidly. So as you can see here, we have plenty of coverage and plenty of examples that we're going to be able to walk you through today. Before we dive into the live examples, I wanted to go through just a few facts and stats. Now, with this category, I probably could have pulled about 100, maybe 1,000 different stats here, but I wanted to focus on a few that are understandable and pretty digestible. So one is family disposable income has declined by 7.8%, while inflation has increased. So what does this mean? This means that this gives the opportunity for finance institutions to be marketing to people on, for example, on ways they can save money with the best rates. And the second here is the housing and stock market landscapes are changing dramatically. I think we can see each day is a little bit different. And again, banks can use this as an opportunity to educate consumers on how to make the most of their investments and how to make smart investments. And then last here is just the Gen Z is quickly becoming the primary consumer demographic. So what does this one mean? So for me, it means that content marketing should be used to reach this audience through social media and other digital platforms. They consume the most media and they're the most loyal consumers. And so content marketing gives all brands the opportunity to really get in front of the right audience and capture their attention with a message that makes sense and a message that really resonates to that core consumer. And one more slide here before I hand it over to Chloe. This one is definitely our favorite, the 5 C's. Chloe's going to walk us through each one of these, but before she dives in, I really wanted to stress just how important it is to create content with purpose and utility for readers. And we try to infuse that in truly everything we do. So whether that's a customized quiz that allows readers to navigate the complicated world of mortgages, or it's an infographic that illustrates the differences between, let's say, banks and credit unions. All content should be created for the audience intended if you want to have the most impact. So with that, I will hand it over to the fantastic Miss Dinsdale. Take it away, Chloe.
Hi, everyone. It's Chloe. Welcome back to our webinar series. As Ali mentioned, we're kicking things off with finance and the 5 C's that we're all familiar with up to this point. So we're going to be walking through some live examples, just like we did with the travel webinar, to talk about the goals and the supporting execution of said C's. So the first one being customization. Customization is represented in this example from Bank of Colorado. Goals are mortgage education, resources, and brick and mortar support and loans. We'll walk through the education live, but expect to see a persona customer journey, a map, a jargon buster gamification element, and some embedded content to interact with. Here you'll notice the Bank of Colorado Mortgage Division presented a experience layout that really defines the type of home buyer that you are and the resources available by Bank of Colorado to get you to your mortgage and financial goals. So what we did here is really broke out, as you could see in that nav bar, the different types of personas and mortgage journeys. They're again broken out here. Each of these is its own landing page, so the refinancer decisions and products will be a little bit different than the mover, the rural landowner, of course, the first timer or the property investor. And this is helpful so that any kind of mortgage journey that you're on, you have support and products that are very specific and curated to you. This is something that Bank of Colorado was able to use digitally as well as within printout versions. So on site at the locations, they do also have a handout with these different types of journeys that we helped custom curate just based on the experience and all of the different things that we wanted to present within this kind of mortgage experience, if you will. So without further ado, I'm going to kind of click into some of these mortgage journeys. But before we do that, there is some resource information that I did point to in terms of execution to get to know a little bit further the landscape of finance, especially when it comes to mortgage. So as the landscape would have it, there's always going to be competition. So there are brick and mortar banks, but there are also bot-based finance business, or fintech we call it, that do provide similar services. So, one of them is kind of like Rocket Loans. So that is a bot-based business that does help you get loans, get information. It's just a little bit without that person-to-person contact. So there's a little bit of a difference there. We have a little bit of an embedded page here that we can navigate to learn more about that. We'll go ahead and just click in here for fun. So this will kind of show you the community bank conversation and around online bot lenders. Here we're kind of weighing the benefits without being overly responsive to each direction. But this will kind of show you, access to help and the speed of communication and the difference in rates. There isn't a ton of difference, as you can see, but there is a lot of support to each of those. Local ties being one of the main missions and values of Bank of Colorado and their communities. There's absolutely that local tie there, which is important if that's important to you and your mortgage persona, and also just in your finance journey. Product offerings, there's also a lot of different programs that you can have and that are custom to you or created for you just in conjunction with that person-to-person interaction. But there's kind of some benefits and values, of course, across lots of different tabs to explore within the subject matter. If we return to the home page and go back to the resource section, we also have an application button that gets you straight into that call to action. And then they also have a more questions page. So this is kind of the ultimate call to action where, okay, you're ready to buy that home, or you're ready to refinance, you're ready to buy that rural land. Here's kind of the loan options available in different circumstances again. So creating that interactive content, answering some of those frequently asked questions, providing that ultimate resource within this page to support Bank of Colorado Mortgage Division. Here again is kind of that breakout of the home buying process look like with the lender. So all of these, again, interactive, answering any question that you might come across without feeling like you're walking in there completely without information to kind of continue on your journey. Banking tools and finding your lender links back to our bespoke map here, which is something that exists on each and every page. But as you'll notice, we can kind of scroll around and get to know some of these locations. These are custom. Obviously, this is kind of your branch officer to interact with. But this is where we can kind of get a sense of place across all of the different divisions and branches that exist. Going back to some of these personas, again, I mentioned there's a nav bar to kind of click around within. Each of these pages is created as a little bit of a sub-hub to really address and put yourself in the reader's shoes. So this is really that first-time home buyer. So what does that experience look like? How do we get started? What do you need to know as a first-time home buyer? So content within content here. This is a little bit more of a broken up, kind of digestible bit of content to read and to get familiar. So definitely something to consider in terms of the digestion and layout and look of the page. Loan products to consider here. So, walking into that brick and mortar bank, perhaps there's some things you can ask as it pertains to these different categories of loans. Something that's important in the financial sector as well, because there is a lot of jargon being used, jargon being just terms and kind of like a glossary of things that people in the space might know, but you may not. This is a way to kind of get familiar with some of that vocabulary and the definitions as to the conversations that you might have. So amortization, appraisals, contingencies, equities. This is really meant to be sort of that gamification element and learning experience that's interactive, lighthearted, somewhat fun, and creates that personality and educational resource that Bank of Colorado was apt to do for their readers in the communities they serve. On the bottom of each page, again, we kind of do have these comparison lender embedded calls to action to continue to read more. We also have a calculator embedded, so you can kind of see the different rates that might pertain to you. And we also embedded blog content. So these are all linking back to Bank of Colorado's home blog on their website and just giving you more information within that said persona as to other how-tos and guides as it pertains to the subject matter. I'm going to do a quick pause. I know we have a few other personas here, but Allie, any questions that you think would be good for reps and clients alike to know about experiences like this as it comes to customization?
Just in terms of the interactive elements, obviously you listed quite a few here. How have you gone about developing the strategy with the client on, determining what to include for either each of the personas or in the overall execution? I think when, people see this, it could be overwhelming to the client. So how do you go about easing that conversation and, developing that strategy with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think when it comes to the strategy, a lot of the times we're backing into kind of what our client has seen and liked. So this client specifically had seen a lot of other industry forward native executions that did have maps, that did have quizzes, that did have some standout interactive material. So what we did is worked together to understand what their journey is like in the communities as a bank. Who is in the community, who typically is coming through that door, how do we want to appeal to new members, and what kind of information do they or don't they have? And so really we took all of those learnings from a lot of the branches actually specifically were able to weigh in on this information. But it was helpful for us to then construct what we needed to do in terms of interactive content. So you saw the jargon buster here. I'll scroll back down to it on our lovely first timer page. This exists on all of the pages, so across refinancer to rural landscape and movers. But this was something that they struggled with a lot in their communities, was actually getting people to understand the different definitions of what's being put forward on paper. There's lots of paper, and they think that process is relatively can be a fearful one. Finance for a lot of people is something that's a little scary to talk about and scary to plan. But they're ultimately there, Bank of Colorado's mortgage division, to be that support and that trusted leader and the community relationship there that they have. They're really able to take care of you and to be there for support. So that was one thing, and that's how a lot of this was constructed. But to show that support and to show that we really want to educate the community and we really want to put these terms forward as something to kind of get familiar with, but it's not a big deal if you don't know what they are. It's just kind of that lifestyle element. I think it really resonated with not only the client here, but then of course, as we saw in readership, there was lots of click activity on things like gamification elements. During the holidays, they did a holiday fraud piece, which there was a lot of cyber threats and a lot of cyber hacking and things going on. For a financial institution, that is a huge topic to address and to make sure that your readers and your customers are absolutely taking the precautions when it comes to online scams, even phone scams, texting now, QR codes, there's scamming going on. So actually to get familiar with that content, while it's fear-based in the sense of, don't put your financial information out there. It was meant to be kind of more lifestyle and holiday focused. And so we actually did do an execution around a holiday Jeopardy, actually. So you can play a game to get to know different frauds that are out there and the schemes associated there. So it all comes together, to answer your question, Allie, very organically from a standpoint of what do the readers need and what is important in the space to convey.
Yeah, I love that. I mean, I know our goal is always to bring some level of utility to all of the projects we create, and I think that you just absolutely nailed it here. And then one more question. You said at the beginning, just in terms of how they're using a lot of this content in some of their printed pieces. So I just wanted to remind the listeners here that everything that we create, the client owns, so they're able to use all of these wonderful digital pieces in all of their different marketing outlets.
Yeah, exactly. So that is something that they, as an add-on wanted to make sure that they had. And all of the branches were really receptive to not only kind of looking at the digital media, but being like, this is really important to talk about, face to face as well. And so that handout piece came again organically just from client need and the continual communication that we're able to provide with this client and with all of our clients, just to make sure we're reaching goals and being of utmost help and resource ourselves when it comes to this content. Without further ado, though, I know we have lots of examples to walk through. So property investor, I kind of scrolled through, refinancer, these are just creating different assets, different conversations, different mortgage processes and information to know. So just, on an arm's length, that's kind of how the execution came together. Next C is Choice. For Choice, we are going to feature the Texas Bay Credit Union. They are a client out of Houston. They've been here with us for recurring years. This year, they just upgraded everything to high impact. So they're very much loving innovating alongside us over the course of time. For this specific series, we're focusing a lot on the education, new customer acquisition, and of course, educating on investments. For execution on that, we've also sprinkled in quizzes, infographics, and the way the content comes about is actually formulated into more of a tip type sharing story. So for Choice, again, Texas Bay Credit Union, they really want to empower your decisions. So getting that educational content across is really important. And so when we think about the execution of what the story is looking like as we scroll, it very much is coming into kind of this tip format or a little bit more of like a listicle in senses. So as I scroll, you'll kind of recognize that being its sort of high impact layout, apart from other features like embedded banners or units, creative calls to action and headlines here used. As I scroll down, we've also embedded things like links to apps, and we're tracking all of this information, all this click activity all the while. And of course, measuring the time spent on the page to understand, are people interacting with some of the infographics? Are we getting lots of clicks? As we scroll, you'll also notice that there is a quiz element as well. So we're also intaking that into our time spent. But here, as we continue to scroll, you'll see kind of that tip content, that educational resource to gain awareness of everything that Texas Bay can help with in achieving your goals for 2023. Here's that embed of that quiz. So here you can kind of see some more lifestyle graphics used here just to kind of get your mind wrapped around some of the ideas and light bulbs, if you will, for the finance category. So here we can kind of, play with this, and just for entertainment's sake and also just for interaction, we can kind of just click through these and see sort of how we get through this quiz and what that interaction looks like. So we can kind of get kind of fun with it. And again, all of these are being recorded, and we're able to gain insights that can further some of the messaging for Texas Bay. As I mentioned, that they are doing a series of stories. So we're already kind of growing into their February and March content as we speak. So again, kind of scrolling through some of these unique examples in that full bleed experience, no standard IAB units on the page, just like with all StoryStudio executions, and really nice kind of graphics here used with brand guidelines in mind. Allie, do you have any questions on Texas Bay financials in terms of the graphic executions and the goal setting and sort of how that is compounding series after series?
I don't know necessarily if I have a question on this one, but I do have a couple comments. So this client is a long-term client of the Houston Chronicle, and they've been running the traditional format of stories for the last couple of years. And this year, we just moved them over to that high impact that you see here, as well as added those interactive elements. And they're seeing a huge uptick just in terms of site traffic, as well as engagement with those stories. I think, when we originally rolled out that high impact format, we thought it would be more so for the travel, the hospitality, but really it just shows that, this format truly does work for any type of category.
Yeah, I think that's so fair. And in every industry, we're seeing this growth, from kind of our standard editorial into more of this high bleed experience. As Ellie mentioned, we're seeing a lot more interactivity. The readership and time spent is up. So we're definitely, like with our clients here at Texas Bay, trying to innovate alongside our customers and our clients. So always open to the conversation and kind of the bespoke design elements and thought starters that go along with things like this. Speaking of high impact layouts and the importance of interaction, we are brought to our next C, which is convenience. This convenience C is supported by the example on the right for Better Mortgage. It seems like a double-edged sword here. We're covering brick and mortar banks, but we're also covering fintech. Both are very important. Both are very much in the space, and both are very much, really content forward topics that really have a lot to be said when it comes to content. So for Better Mortgage, the goals here obviously is to educate a little bit about refinancing education and the bought business advantages. So a little bit on the flip side of that sword. And we're having here some goals to obviously have some downloads, cash offers and benefits being cashed in, and ultimately some loans being cashed out. Execution-wise, you'll notice some Lightbox infographics as I scroll on the next tab, also an embedded mortgage calculator, and again, just that really nice, robust example of a high-impact layout. As you'll notice, this is on SF Gate as a sponsored story. We've got a little animation going on. We've got our full bleed experience and no standard ad units on the page. This is our sponsor here, Better Mortgage. So we've got some links, as you can see as I hover, that are being measured from this experience. Within this, we have a little bit of an editorial framework here with double columns, a little bit juxtaposed, of course, to kind of keep the conversation flowing. Nice graphics here, and we paired this with a little bit of an infographic. So again, these are called Lightbox executions, and they just kind of present information in an interactive format with different calls to action and just that visual piece and that entertainment element, if you will, within the graphic execution. These are all being measured again, so knowing a little bit more about the Better Cash offer and measuring up some of those embedded links. This is very education forward in a sense, so we definitely want to make sure we're getting across a lot of that conversation and that robust story to be told. Here's that module that has the mortgage calculator embedded here. So this is a call to action to the client site to then further sort of the journey as it comes to fintech and buying a new home through one of these app-based businesses. And here's kind of how we can get started with that process as well as that kind of final call to action. And again, with our social buttons, making sure people are getting familiar with the brand and tying all the brand elements together. This green and yellow landscape is very much in line with the site that Better Mortgage operates on. So it's great to see kind of those calls to action and everything curated with the brand's guidelines in mind, and also just within that fun kind of light-spirited framework and layout that really has a lot of robust information to convey. So a little different, obviously, than our mortgage journey persona with Bank of Colorado, but educational nonetheless, and absolutely that full lead experience that's impactful for readership and client interaction. Allie, any questions on Better Mortgage Business?
Yeah, on this one, it's interesting. You can probably imagine, getting in touch with, people at the regional banks are probably a little bit easier than something of this capacity, right? With that more national scale. Do you typically work with agencies with a Better Mortgage or a SoFi, or does it come client direct, just to kind of point the AEs in the right direction? Like, where do those buys and that interest typically come from?
Yeah, the interest definitely comes from all angles. We've definitely worked with agencies and clients, directly alike. Some of them, in terms of the creative that's produced, the agencies do help create some of the promotional elements, or they have some of those kinds of branded advertising material on hand. So it's really helpful to work with agencies, but not all asks will come through agencies. Sometimes it'll be specific from the client, like in Better Mortgage's case. So they came directly to us. It was a little bit of a newer launched product, definitely a national play, so getting the most reach, and definitely we had the Hearst proposition to be able to hinge on that. So having that national reach, being able to kind of promote that way was important to them, alongside not only the creative but the storytelling elements as well. But to answer your question, it's both, and I wouldn't say that it's easier or better one way or another. It's just a different way of working together. And I think at StoryStudio, we definitely have the process really locked down in terms of what it takes to work with an agency and to communicate with all partners associated to that brand and that initiative. And then also in the direct side, we do have that process down pat, and we're able to really utilize communication and getting folks familiar with the native landscape if they're not generally prior to. But it is kind of a little bit of everybody in that sense. And I do think agencies have a lot of finance clients. We've definitely worked with F&M Trust using Joaquin & Co. We've definitely worked with Karsh Hagen out of Denver for some of the banks here locally. But we've worked, really direct with Better Mortgage and Service Credit Union out of WMUR. So it's really across the board, and fun to do so at that.
Do you ever run into issues just making sure like all the legalese is in there, working with the FDIC? Like, how does that work with more of the national side of it?
So they generally will let us know what kind of legalese needs to be in there. So right here, you'll actually see the MLS listing down here. Sometimes with real estate, we run into that as well. And it's important to know and ask those questions prior to, even with healthcare and definitely within some other categories that we work in, like casinos or any kind of gambling content, that disclaimers are becoming more and more common. And that's definitely the case, I think, with finance too. We want to definitely have our FDIC labels, better mortgage labels, housing equity. We're definitely in the know in terms of what it takes to produce the content and the types of questions to ask for regulatory. And all of the legalese is usually reviewed by a department, in which case our timelines and our projected lead time, we definitely kind of build in some extra time to make sure it's rolled through the ranks, as they say, as to how client is being represented online, and we're able to kind of touch base on that together through communication and project lead time. All right, and just like that, we are on to our next C, which is connection. Here you might recognize Fannie Mae. They're a huge national client, lots of diverse communities that they represent, and we were really pleased to be part of the process here. And actually, we've been able to grow on this business already in 2023. So here we'll look through the 2022 execution, and we'll pinpoint again some of those goals and education or executions to cross this over into the connection realm. But really excited to kind of showcase another really cool aspect here. And one thing you'll notice, or we maybe have some questions about, is, does finance do hubs? And the answer is yes, they sure do. So Fannie Mae bought into a hub series with a story series of 4. So we're growing those stories again in this year, 2023. The goals would be obviously to educate on all things Fannie Mae can provide in terms of product. There's lots of inclusion to be said here, so we're definitely focusing a lot on that storyline and celebrating that storyline, as well as kind of the credit education element. Lots of engagement on the hub page, as hubs are usually comprised of interactive features and encouraging engagement. So the execution we will jump into now. So we'll be able to see our quiz and blog board and sliding infographics. So here's all things Fannie Mae. Really proud of this execution. I had a chance to work on this with my colleague Alex, who became quite the genius at credit. And we had fun kind of with the concept here. Fannie Mae definitely wanted to tell a story from a patient perspective in a sense. So instead of maybe patient, I should probably say reader, because we're in finance here. But this is all about celebrating credit. So it's about education, but at the same time, a lot of the communities that Fannie Mae represents don't get a lot of credit themselves. And it's important to kind of lift up this financial literacy pillar in the space of finance, specifically across content and subject matter, but also within communities. We'll get into this a little bit in another example with US Bank as well, but I think it's really important for content to really let everyone know there is a way to talk about this topic and to address different communities for support and for things like building on some of the literacy. I think kind of crosses back into some of our jargon buster gamification elements as well. Here as a learning element, we actually did some myth busters, so a myth fact quiz a little bit to kind of get to know, again, that lifestyle element education piece that's engaging, that has some fun kind of little factors here flashing with animation. So just for fun, we'll kind of click through some of these. So you'll see you're getting kind of the educational piece as you answer some of the questions. It's short and sweet, so we can kind of take it and move on and continue to kind of interact with this brand. I mentioned there were several featured pieces here. So all of these are high impact layouts within themselves. We'll just click to one to kind of see how those templates really came about and how they really kind of cross over into the same branding landscape. But here you'll see, again, the brand guidelines being represented. Here we're getting some exposure on the CT post, so really supporting this community geographically. These infographics were provided and illustrated so that we could continue to talk about topics like budgeting. But again, this is a kind of high impact layout that's built into the hub series and something we repopulate with each story that we create along the course of time. All of them link back to the hub, so it's a nice kind of continual readership experience. So we can get into establishing good credit and how we can maintain good credit, addressing topics like debt and maybe what's in a score if folks aren't quite sure what's in a credit score and how you can have several of them and what that means and how to kind of upkeep that. So we're really celebrating the educational journey here with these pieces of content. Here's an actual broken out little record to or infographic, if you will, about what's in a credit report. So again, just putting the most relevant information out there so that communities can really get to know a little bit more about credit reports and celebrate the idea of education around them. These campaigns had really cool elements as well. So we had actual ad units that were able to, again, measure impact with, and we also had a video. So we were able to embed video within these experiences as well. This is something that's branded by Fannie Mae, but we can also drop in kind of bespoke raw elements as well that can play on B-roll as another element, and that can also teach something within themselves and be distributed the same way. With this content subject matter, there's definitely some testimonials that were important to kind of really paint the picture and relatability aspect of celebrating education and what it means. So we wanted to kind of tell those stories. And I think the best way that we knew how was through Fannie Mae's actual Instagram, because they had so many great faces and journeys and stories to tell. And so this can really help us engage specifically with their social following and to grow on it. And this is something that each time they post is updated. So it will continually be updated along the course of not only their hub promotion, but the longevity of the projects as well. So really, really great execution here. And I know there might be some questions around this.
Yeah, this looks great. I mean, we were obviously super excited about the award for this one. It sounded like Fannie Mae signed on for another year as well. What's the plan for is it updating this hub, or is it just adding to this hub through those individual high impact stories?
Yeah, so actually we'll be using the hub page itself. We're going to update all of the creative and a lot of the messaging, but we're going to swap in all new content in the blog board section and recreate two pieces here. So recreate the myth fact and definitely our infographic into kind of an appropriate 2023 conversation. There is a lot of, kind of doom and gloom information out there about the 2023 financial landscape as it comes to the investment stock market and as it comes to even home loans. And so our idea is definitely to kind of get in front of that and kind of steady the tiller on some of that information. I think really important in finance to not only get across what your products can do, but also the support that these types of organizations can have for their communities when it comes to something as elusive as the economy. So I think there's some really good conversation that we'll have on that subject matter. And our client F&M is kind of focused on the same thing. And we even have other industries like law actually kind of getting into the conversation as well as to how they can kind of just prep people around the conversations that could happen in 2023 and what that really means for their educational knowledge and their portfolio here, of course, in finance. So it's a really interesting, I think, 2023 execution, and we're going to be really excited to share it. And you did mention that we got an award for this, and I didn't actually tell anyone about it, but if you're able to kind of check it out on our webinar landing page post meeting, I think you'll be really impressed to see kind of what those credits really told about our storytelling elements, our process, and the success the client saw and that we saw as well. All right, and we're on to our last C, which is community. This concept really kind of ties back into what we just kind of covered with Fannie Mae. Kind of crazy that with Fannie Mae, we're celebrating, celebration as well, which is our sixth C. But again, community, all of these C's kind of cross over. So we're kind of talking about each of these as their own singular experience, but keep in mind a lot of this exists elsewhere. So within this community, we're going to talk about kind of the AAPI movement here with US Bank, but I very much kind of want to draw off some of the same ideas that we used for Fannie Mae that we just covered. So the goals specifically being kind of diversity and inclusion. So both existing in both of those concepts, but this one kind of leaning more into that community specific information in terms of donations and support. So with the execution, you'll notice things like infographics and testimonials, very much existent in the Fannie Mae Hub, of course, too, but just with a different client, this one being a little bit more national as well, and supporting more of that community factor. So here's the story that we wrote. This was really very much about that diversity and inclusion of US Bank during a time when there was an AAPI Heritage Month to celebrate. So here we're kind of talking about positive change and how big business can really be a part of these conversations. We've had this come up in other categories as well, like food and beverage, and other industries as well in terms of donations and support and really talking to things going on in the environment. So we kind of love this concept and definitely think there's opportunity not only in finance, but further to grow these kinds of ideas and really put brands in a unique perspective to be able to support communities that they serve. So here we've got a lot of great imagery. Another example of a high impact layout as well. And all of these embedded links kind of showing you some of the different things that US Bank is up to in the communities to kind of share what it means with the AAPI movement. Here we've got some testimonials that were mentioned. This is another kind of, just a graphic execution of different ways to do that. So here's being a slideshow. We also created an infographic about the different support and grants that US Bank does give into these kinds of foundations and communities served. So here's just 3 great examples with a visual to just kind of showcase some of that unique information and call out the important work that they're doing. And here's kind of, again, another plug to the grants that have been delivered within the communities and populations, at need and celebrated and being lifted up in this kind of story. So it's kind of short and sweet, and it's definitely got a lot of giving and philanthropic need to it. That was a call to the community to also become involved. So here again, we talked a little bit about disclaimers early on too, and apart from disclaimers, we also do like little about us snippets. That's important in a kind of concept like this, where we're not talking about banking so much as we are talking about community and support and connection on that. But here's kind of where we can give a plug about US Bank and who they are and kind of their ethics and values and who the contacts could be for continuing communication around this effort. So again, some more learning opportunities, some information to kind of enroll in some of the products that US Bank has. So trying to kind of run the full gamut here of not only branding, but support and some product there at the bottom. So again, all the 5 C's really do have a way to kind of integrate together, and it's kind of fun to see the overlap, but it's really actually kind of cool to see these financial institutions create such leadership in their markets, and we're able to kind of build off of that in continued efforts. We did do another story with US Bank to a more Filipino community, and we celebrated Pasko, which is a holiday tradition. So we're doing a lot in diversity and inclusion in finance, and I think that's important when it comes to the ideals of banking and the education, celebration, and diverse mix of communities and literacy in terms of finance that we support. With literacy as well, it's important to note that we do see bilingual content. So I'm sure, Ali, this would be one of your questions for this one, but we absolutely can translate content. So we definitely can do Spanish, Chinese. We have done lots of different bilingual executions, and they do have their own little distributional strategy as well, as we pair them with headlines in the native promotion space and connect that to different IP addresses that are meant for kind of translation services. So we're really happy to kind of wrap things up with this example and showcase all things finance through real life examples and thought starters and leadership, as well as execution and visuals and the fun lifestyle element that content like finance can ultimately have and provide to the communities. Before we jump into a really exciting sales opportunity, might there be any questions, Ali, just to wrap up some of our C's?
So do you typically just do a direct translation of the story itself, or I know there's a lot of just language nuance, or do you have it written in the original language?
Yeah, that's a good question. So there are definitely things that can be nuanced between language. So we do hire and translate out these pieces with those that do speak the languages. We don't use like AI technology yet, at least, to be able to translate this. So this is coming from those speakers who actually do kind of live and breathe these communities, if you will. So there is a separate charge associated with that. It's minimal in the grand scheme of things, especially because we want to be able to gear these towards the community that they're serving and be spoken in the languages that are spoken. It's kind of a nuanced approach, but I think it's one that we've definitely been able to deliver on and successfully, report on.
Yeah, I think it being written in language is so important, and I think it really just shines through in the content. And then you also just mentioned the distribution strategy, which you touched on it, but I also I want to just reiterate that each piece that we create in a different language outside of English has its own promotional plan. And as Chloe said, it'll have its own promotional cards. It goes to the in-language readers, and it only runs on in-language sites. So it ends up being a pretty immersive experience overall.
Yeah, agreed. So with that, we'll kind of lead into our next sales opportunity. All right, really, really great content and conversations so far. Lots of important questions, extremely important landscape of finance. But now on to the fun part, the new sales opportunity. So thanks for sticking with us. Now you will be rewarded. We are offering free high impact layouts for new and or current content through 3/17. So you've got about a month to socialize this with clients. Again, new and current content. So pretty much we're going to say yes. And we'd love to be able to work on more finance examples and really attack this category post kind of our learnings today with you. And if there are any questions on this sales opportunity, you know where to find us at our handle at StoryStudio@Hearst.com. But we think that this is a growing category and something that's worth kind of lifting up these efforts and communicating and socializing some of these concepts that we ran through today and some of the seasonality that will be approaching here in the spring, the summer, in the economy. All good conversations to be had. Another exciting update is that we are now live on social media. So we have been posting for about a week now. So you'll see our profile to the right. Our handle is at Hearst Story Studio on Instagram. We also have a Facebook and LinkedIn. We do post industry forward content on LinkedIn. We are on our own Instagram, building our own social footprint. So we will be posting about 3 times a week from now till forever. And all of that to say, we do have social packages as well. So we are growing those packages, those sales opportunities. They are a lower package in terms of dollars. So they're going to be very fruitful for all of the clients all across the board in HTV and H&P purposes. But here's a good place to kind of showcase some of the stuff we have done. In this little screenshot on the top left, that's actually a client that I work with a lot and was featured in the travel webinar. That's Wachusett Mountain. We've done what's called a collab post where we both have it on our feeds. And in it, we're telling a story about mythbusters when it comes to skiing at Wachusett Mountain. We've been able to grow some followers from the account. They've been also able to grow some followers. And it's a really nice way to showcase some of the social properties that we're rolling out. So give us a follow, give us a shout. If you have a client that you'd love to get to know a little bit more about social, we're here for all educational opportunities. I'm going to flash our slide on StoryStudio Help Center. Of course, this will be in follow-up in our email as well as the landing page for the webinar. So be sure to check this out. And again, reach out if you have any questions. So, and on that note, we're going to end with a Q&A session. So we'll go ahead and end our presentation here and open up the floor.